Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Herb Alpert School of Music. I am Shahab Paranj, Artistic Director of Gramian-Emrani Center for Iranian Music. Tonight's event is part of the 2025-26 Iranian Music Lecture Series at UCLA, and we are honored to dedicate it to Professor Hormoz Farhat, one of the most influential figures in Iranian music. I had so many reasons to create this event dedicated to Dr. Farhat, his legacy as a composer, also as a musicologist, ethnomusicologist, scholar. But more than anything else, it was his history with UCLA as a student, also his research in Iranian music back in 1965 when Professor Mantelhood, he was assistant professor of Dr. Mantelhood, and he suggested that he has to pay attention to Iranian music more than anything else. I think this is wonderful as that reminds us if you have a great mentor, what would happen? You know, you can make history. So what happened was he suggested Dr. Farhat, he has to research about Iranian music. And of course, he did a great job with his dissertation, The Concept of Dastgāh, and later on become a book in 1990, published with Cambridge University. So today's program is divided to different parts. I'm going to talk a little about, give a little background about his music and his life. Also, brief talk about the concept of Dastgāh and his approach of defining Iranian music. And then later, Dr. Robert Garfias, who is old friends and colleagues from those old good days, I would say, will join us and share all the great memories he had with Dr. Farhat. It's wonderful. Dr. Garfias is probably one of the most popular person I've ever seen at UCLA. So whenever we talk about him, everyone showed up, and it's wonderful to have him. Thank you. He joined us. He came all the way from Orange County to be with us today. And then also Dr. Farhad's wife, Maria Bagramian, joined us from London, and she's great to be with us. It's great to be with her today, but also she's going to share a great news about Dr. Farhad's basically music and all the scores that make it possible for everyone to basically make it accessible for everyone. So now I would like to start reading a short bio of Dr. Farhat. Composer, author, and academic Hormoz Farhat was a professor of music and head of the School of Music in Trinity College, Dublin from 1982 until his retirement in 1995, after which he was given the title of Emeritus Professor. He was born in August 1928 in Tehran. He got his college education in the US, where he received Bachelor in Music at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, in 1953. 2 years later, he was awarded as Master in Composition at Mills College, California. He received a PhD in Composition and Ethnomusicology from UCLA in 1965. His first academic post was as assistant professor of the music at California State University in 1961-64, followed by 5 years as associate professor of music at UCLA in 1964-69. Returning to his native country, he served as a professor and head of the music department at the University of Tehran from 1970 to 78. He also chaired the Music Council at the National Iranian Radio and TV Network and had a central role in the Shiraz Art Festival. In his 2019 memoir, Present Past, Note from the Life of Persian American in January 1978, the Iranian Revolution began. The regime of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi collapsed, and the Islamic Republic was established in the spring of 1979. Believing music and the arts would fare badly under the new order, Farhat wrote to Blacking about his desire to leave Iran. Within days, a telegram arrived from Belfast with an offer of temporary position at Queen's. The 1-year appointment was extended to 2 years, but permanent post seemed unlikely, and Blacking's advised he apply successfully for the music professorship at TCD and took up to the position in September 1982. As a composer, Farhat wrote a substantial body of work for wide spectrum instrument and voice. He also composed scores for film, including the Iranian production The Cow, directed by Dariush Mehjoui. The Cow movie actually was one of the first. It was the first movie for the new wave of filmmaking in Iran. Excuse me. The film won International Federation of Film Critics Prize at the Venice Film Festival in 1971, the first time Iranian cinema received an award as an international event. His composition has been performed by the RTE National Symphony Orchestra, BBC Symphony Orchestra, English Chamber Orchestra, Tehran Symphony Orchestra, and the Chamber Orchestra of the National Iranian Radio and Television Network. His works have been performed by many soloists, including Irish pianist Mary Dolia. Hormoz wrote several other books, including the Dastgāh concept in Persian music. In May 2018, he returned to his native country for the first time after 39 years for the ceremony hosted by the Iranian Artists Forum to honor the composer's professional career. On his passing, a message of sympathy was issued by Farah Pahlavi, the former Empress of Iran and widow of the Shah, who expressed her condolences to the nation, to Iranian artists and the family of Dr. Farhat on the occasion of the passing of great artist and musician. Professor Farhat is survived by his wife, Maria Bagramian, born in Iran of Armenian heritage, who is a professor of American philosophy at the University of College Dublin and a member of the Royal Irish Academy, and their son, Robert, a music programmer and manager in London. So now I would like to play a little audio file that we have. By the way, I need to thank my colleagues at ethnomusicology department in archive. They were very helpful sending me all the files for the days that Dr. Farhat was working and was a student here. So let me play the This is a radio interview in 1966, and he brought this recording of Maestro Ebadi to demonstrate Iranian instrument and talk about Iran.
Dastgāh.
So that was Ahmad Ebadi,
Yes.
a virtuoso indeed, such an amazing range of emotion within the same mode. I hope I'm right. Was that one of the modes you mentioned before?
Yes, this was one of the what I would call modal structures or modal systems, which are called Dastgāhs. Dastgāh is a name for 12 modal systems in Persian music, each of which embodies several modes. So as you notice in this one we just heard, there were a number of modulations. So within one system there are several modes that are introduced and interwoven into one another.
I see. Would you say this was an improvised piece, or does it exist in
Oh
notation?
yes, no, this was entirely, when I say entirely, understanding that they begin with certain known melodic patterns that they develop
I see.
and enlarge. So you might say something like perhaps 10% of the music is predetermined. Then 90% is created on the spur of the moment.
And the mode, the Dastgāh, as you call it, is identifiable by anyone.
Well, anyone who is learned in Persian music, and a good many of the people who are not musicians but who have listened, who have heard a great deal of Persian music, yes, they can identify the Dastgāhs. But not anyone, no.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have either have studied or heard a great deal of Persian music.
I don't want to sound like a sponsor, but if anybody who wants to know more about Dastgāh, all they have to do is to read your book, it'll be no problem.
Well, when it comes out, yes.
It will very soon, I think. What would you like to play for us next?
It is the
Why
same
don't we
room.
play a number of
So one,
recordings of various
1959,
instruments playing
that's
different notes.
2019 when he
Fine, so
visited
excellent.
us.
Then we can then conclude with some vocal music at the end.
Wonderful.
To begin with,
That's opinion.
we will hear an example of the tar playing another of the Dastgāhs. That will be followed by a kamanche performance of another Dastgāh,
That's Kamanche.
followed by a santur performance, and then we will have a nai performance of another Dastgāh. I think that ought to be sufficient.
Okay, thank you. So now I would like to talk about the concept of the Dastgāh concept in Persian music. We have to remember when he was working on this topic, there was not much resources in English language, even in Persian, in that sense, defining Iranian music. And again, this was the great, I would call it even masterpiece for its time. and I still use it as a reference book for my classes. Um, and I wish the generation after Dr. Farhat would approach defining music in that sense. You know, for me, I feel a lot of, I feel besides being at UCLA um, and having this pressure of responsibility of carrying uh, someone like Dr. Farhad's legacy here, but for me, because I am a composer, my degree was also was in classical music composition, but my research was in Iranian music, so I feel connected to Dr. Farhad's the research and his music life. So the way he explained and defined Iranian music in this book, it's from a composer's mind, I would say. And it's very useful for when I try to explain and define this music for my student at UCLA, they they can connect with this. You know, Persian music is an oral tradition. You know, a lot of improvisation involved. It's hard sometimes to define what they do, but you know, I think he was successful accomplishing defining the music. So this book was published in 1990, but the research started in 1965. So this is basically the chapter in the book, and he gives a brief historical perspective, which is very interesting in my opinion. The musical tradition of ancient Iran are largely unknown until Sasani period, AD 226 to 642, when musicians such as Barbot flourished at the court of Khosrow and develop an elaborate system of modes and melodies whose structure are now lost. After the Arab conquest, Persian culture, more advanced than that of the conquerors, become dominant force in shaping Islamic music. By the way, when we say Islamic music or Islamic art, it's the Islamic period in certain country, in this case in Iran, with many leading Arab theorists in fact being Persian scholar writing in Arabic. Despite early religious opposition to music, the Abbasi era saw a major development by figures such as Farabi, Avicenna, Safieddin, and Maraghi. Musical developments by figures such as, musical scholarship declined from the 16th century to early 20th century due to the restrictive climate of Shia clerical rule. Though performance tradition continued under Safavid and Qajar, during which the modern 12 Dastgāh system took shape. Beginning in the 20th century, westernization revived musical institutions, scholarship, and performance in Iran, producing orchestra, conservatories, and notable researchers. However, following the 1979 revolution, the renowned dominance of Shia clerics' music again faced restriction, putting Iran's long and rich musical heritage at risk. And at the end of the book, actually, he mentioned with this book, he was hoping that he could keep and preserve the heritage, which I think he was very successful on that. And then the next chapter is about the interval and concept of the tone in Iranian classical music. So he found three different approaches of understanding and defining tones in Iranian classical music. One was by Ali Naqi Vaziri, proposed that Persian music is built on equal temperament scale of 24 quarter tone. original motivation of this, he mentioned, is influenced by Western music, especially equal temperament and harmony. Believed Persian music had to adopt Western harmonic concept to consider advanced. Quarter tones were chosen to accommodate intervals not found in Western major-minor scale. Musical reform in the late 19th, early 20th century Persia, European visit, military bands, Western pedagogy shaped Vaziri's outlook. But he is criticizing that by saying Persian music does not actually use true quarter tones, nor are its interval multiple of quarter tones. And then the theory of artificially imposes Western equal temperament in order to allow harmony. And then also the approach towards authentic Persian modal practice. Then he look at the second view of looking at basically tones and scale in Iranian music is by Mehdi Berkeshli in 1940s. He was working on that. Berkeshli argued that Persian music uses 22 tones per octave based on measurement and medieval Islamic theory. And source for Mehdi Berkeshli, I think it was mainly Farabi and Safieddin Armavi. And he criticized that also. It says measurement based on vocal recording are basically unreliable, assumed an octave scale framework similar to Western or medieval system or artificial container. And then also theory never gained traction among musicians. And then we have the third view, which I think it's something that he would agree more, is Zionist, the author of Theory of Flexible Intervals, mid-20th century. Key idea, Persian music is not built on fixed scale, neither 24 nor 22 or 17. Instead, it uses 5 flexible interval types that vary in size depending on modes and performances. Core claims is interval are fluid, not fixed, or equal temperament. So overall, for the conclusion, he says Persian classical music cannot be accurately understood through rigid Western style scale. Its core identity lies to flexible intervals, expressive nuance, and modal structure, not in equal temperament, fixed octave division, or comprehensive pitch collection. So now I would like to talk about, so as you see in each chapter, he goes over each Dastgāh, each 12 Dastgāh, and I wanted to show one particular Dastgāh, see how he was defining those gushe in each particular Dastgāh. So here we have this terminology that he's using for elements that exist in each gushe. So what I really like about this, these of course exist in Iranian music in each gushe, but what he does, he basically organized them and put them together and come up with some, I think the word finales, it was something that he was using it. And constantly he was trying to avoid associating Iranian music, comparing it with Western classical theory, but sometimes it's inevitable, like the finale. I have used the word finale to preference the tonic, which has direct association with the harmonic system of Western music. So these words, as we see, one is Aghaz. Aghaz is basically the tone that begins the gushe with. And the most important one is East. Stop, basically, is the melody. When you play the melody, is the one that you land on it. But it's not home. Home is finale, you know. And the shahid also is the one that if we are playing 4 or 5 pitches, the one that is repeated the most or is more prominent. It has a more prominent role. And the mutaghayyir or changeable is the one that is basically changing. You go up ascending as E flat and then come back as E quarter flat. Now, let me go over this. So back then when he was writing the book, he mentioned that Nawa is one of those Dastgāh that in Iranian music they don't play it more often, which is interesting. After the revolution, they performed a lot of concerts and they played Nawa. Especially Maestro Alizadeh wrote so many great music in Nawa, which I know Professor Farhat actually liked him very much. So let's look at Nawa, and these are the king, I would call it king gushe. We have Daramad, Bayat Raje, Neyshaburak, Araq, and Nahovd. Remember, in each Dastgāh we have more than 20 gushe, but these are the most important one that I wanted to show how Professor Farhat defined them, how they are different from each other, besides its melodic shape. So here we are in Daramad, for example. So I can play sitar, that helps me to define the music. So we are in Nawa C. So this is Nawa in C. So if you are in Daramad, the tetrachord below C is the one that we maneuver the most. See, we are here, the East is on A quarter flat. Now, we wanted to go to the next gushe, Bayat Raje. And you see the East is moving to D now. So, you can play a lot of different melody, but your East is basically on D, and that's called Bayat Raje. So the most, this is pentachord type of, for this particular gushe, that these 5 pitches, which shows in the bracket, is the one that maneuver for this particular gushe. And then we go to Neyshaburak. So let's say we are in Bayat Raje still. Now we are in E flat. The East is on E flat. That's Neyshaburak. And the, repeat is one of the most common sign for Neyshaburak is this kind of melodic shape. And now we wanted to move to another gushe called Araq. So the Araq, as you see, everything is going to land on F. But for that, we need to change E quarter flat to E flat to E quarter flat. So if we are in Neyshaburak, now we are in a, see? from there, we wanted to go to Nahoft. But in Nahoft, we have to bring back now we wanted to go to Nahoft, but we are in G. Remember the east. Shahed and A. East could also function to be as a shahed, to be on A. So there are so many. It's not restrict to say this has to be there, this has to be there. But he came up with this strategy to define the music in a way with these elements that, of course, you cannot comprehend the music that way, but this devices gives you the opportunity to see the direction of the different gushe in each dastgāh. Let's go back to what it was here again in Nawa. So again, in Daramad, we were all maneuvering here, and then Bayat Raje, East was here, E flat, Arab, F, G. So simple. So that's something you can basically understand when you see it. You just then you can relate it to your to the music that you hear. So this is the general concept. Of course, there are so much detail. I encourage you, if you are a musician, because if you're not, it can be a little complex. But you know, I would suggest to read this book, and I'm sure you can find it online. Anyways, now let's listen to a short music by, it's a string quartet by Professor Farhat. It's his third string quartet. And then I'm going to invite Dr. Garfias to join us. Dr. Garfias, please join us.
Climbing up the stairs in the dark. Okay. If I may speak first, thank you. That was a beautiful demonstration. I think, you know, the Gushe Dastgāh relationship is very, very mysterious to me because it doesn't exist in Turkish music, which I know a little bit about. But I'm sure it's there, but it's not named and it doesn't function quite the same way. And I know, like, I hear Mahur and I recognize Delkash, Mahur, Delkash, oh yeah, okay. But this was very interesting and it enlightened me a bit further. Also, I got to say that that first beautiful photograph of Hormoz Farhat was taken by my younger colleague, Dan Newman. Some of you know him in other contexts, but he's a great photographer. Give him credit there. Sure. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Garfias. Thank you for being here. I know, as I mentioned, you're probably one of the most favorite people at UCLA.
Favorite.
So, yeah. If this was not in final weeks, I'm sure we had full house, people coming to see you.
History is watching us, so it's
exactly. No, so I know so many people actually watching us through live stream. Would you please start telling us how you met Dr. Farhat and about those days, all the developments in ethnomusicology program, please?
This is very difficult because I think in 50-minute segments, but I'll try to make it short. And I know a lot about this. But the first thing I'm trying to think to all of you, well, that seems a long time ago, you have to put it in context. We didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones. We used to write letters. We wrote letters to each other. That's how we made arrangements to meet. You know, you go to a foreign country, you wrote a letter in advance. The other thing is that in the 50s, this was in the mid-50s, I can't remember what year I came, 55, 56, something like that, to UCLA. And Hormoz was here already. But Hormoz was from the beginning, he was like more mature than all of us. I got to say that in those days, you might find it shocking, but all of the graduate students wore a suit and a necktie to school every day. We all wore ties every day. That was standard dress. That's how we came. Hormoz, of course, was always well-dressed, but he was always a little bit more refined. He was a real mature gentleman. Somehow or other, Hormoz seemed to have it all together. He lived downtown LA. He had a car. He would drive from all the way from downtown. Challenging even then, but none of us did that. We all lived very close to campus, as close as we could. But he had a European air about him from the beginning. I don't know how. I wonder now how he came out of Iran in those days and got all these ideas to learn French and to pursue French literature, for example, and then study here and then study with Milo. The other thing I want to put in context, for almost all of the ethnomusicologists of the first wave, and I consider us the first wave, the first group of students in America of Mantle Hood, which was really the beginning of ethnomusicology here, almost simultaneously with a few other places, but really more or less the first. All of them were either concert pianists, performing musicians, or composers. I was a composer. Hormoz was a composer. He thought of himself as a composer, I think, right up until he got into or was encouraged by Mantle Hood to turn his view onto Persian music. So he was a composer who was Persian, who was looking into the roots of Persian music, wanted to learn more about it. I was really I came out of it from a jazz musician, a little bit different. I was a musician, but a composer. But I got into ethnomusicology like it was like my field, so I really got into it quite a little bit differently than that. I didn't think of myself as a composer approaching ethnomusicology. I just plunged in. But that was a great part of what I learned from Hormoz was his view as a composer. You say he viewed, he looked at ethnomusicology as a composer. I thought we all did. We were analytical in the sense that as a composer wants to know how something is put together, analyzing it and understanding it. Because, and in the case of all, I think the first 5, 6, 7 ethnomusicologists from the student of Mantle Hoods, we all went and did original work. There was nothing before, there were no books on our subject before we got there. So we were all doing original work from scratch. And this is what you say, this is what, in fact, what the Dastgāh book is. It's a first look at organizing what was. And the other thing I would just say for context, at that time, I think there was only one recording of Persian music that was available anywhere. I mean, that was the age, right? The 50s were the time when Hugh Tracy's marvelous recordings of African music were appearing, and Alain Danielou's compendium of sounds of Indian, North Indian and South Indian. We were hearing the real music from the first time, because up until then we had only heard these little snippets on 78 copies. There was one example of Persian music in the Hornbostel collection, Music of the Orient. There was one piece. It was the only thing we had to go to. So I thought, you know, I thought all Arabic, Middle Eastern, all the same. No, from Hormoz I learned, no, there's Turkish, there's Persian, and there's Arabic. And these are very distinct musical languages. And that gradually became clear. And then, of course, as we heard more and more music, that became clearer. So Hormoz was a very enlightening person, even though he was himself being enlightened at the same time. So we learned together, but I really felt he was more mature, more advanced than the rest of us, even then. He was a gentleman already formed and finished when he got here. So
that's amazing. I would like to know a little about those days in a way that, I mean, we have a lot of development, especially related to Iranian music right now at UCLA. But back then, as you mentioned, this was just started, and it's like, you know, you're walking in darkness sometimes. So, you know, it's very probably useful for all of us to know when we go back and look at what things started to shape and created. What can we learn from those days?
Well, for one thing, you're never prepared. You're never prepared because it's always, you gradually come aware that there's something totally unexpected. For example, we had some kind of exposure to raga and maqam generally. But this system, which happens to be probably only about 200 years old, you know, the Dastgāh system, you know, when I looked at that list, by the way, I know all of these people, everyone of them, everyone, although I'm not in the picture. I was in Japan at the time, this was 1959, but I know all these guys. You know. All of those Dastgāh, except for 2, are actually also maqams, in the basic maqams in Turkish music. Right. So they came, the Turkish system came originally from Persian musicians who went to Turkey, and then the Turks kept it up and evolved from that. But so it's all very familiar, and even almost all the names of those gushe also are separate maqams in Turkish music. But the organization of it was something created in Iran about 200 years ago. Nobody knew that. Maybe Hormoz did, but certainly not to the rest of us. And this was something that we became enlightened of. So you go there and gradually you work on it, and you have to tell yourself, wait a minute, I'm assuming that, but I assumed incorrectly. I have to look at what's actually there. And sometimes it takes a long time. You see it, and you don't recognize what is actually going on because you're preconceived, you have it, you're in your mind what you expect, and you refuse to accept what you see. And takes education. That takes real exposure and inundating yourself, drowning yourself in the music. So I think this is obviously a great example, but perfect example of what most of us were doing about this time, going to different places and discovering.
Right. I mean, it is interesting to explore, to understand what does it mean to have someone like Dr. Farhat in institution like UCLA, and having mentorhood, and that encourage him to focuses on Iranian music, which is interesting. I think this is something that I've been wondering for several years now. Sometimes, even if you are in Turkey or if you are in Iran, they are more Eurocentric than if you go outside of Iran. So it's very important, someone like Mantelhood encouraging him to focuses on Iranian music, which again, they made a history. This book is very important, especially that it's written in English language. This is something that a lot of I always encourage Iranians. We need to create knowledge, not only in our language, but also in other languages that can define us. That's something I wanted to know.
It's very interesting because we were a product of that period, too, of that time in history. It's all like at the end of World War II. Before that, people traveled very little to different countries, but suddenly after World War II, for example, in the movie industry, after World War II, you couldn't show fake Hollywood sets of these different countries. You had to have really actual people had been there. They wanted it to look like, and it doesn't look like that. So we were going to working in all these countries, and we're discovering it's a kind of an ideal time because these cultures had been isolated from each other. India, Japan, Iran, and there hadn't been a lot of communication. Suddenly, after the 50s and 60s, communication increases. Television comes around. So, in a sense, I look at my period study in Japan at that time in the 50s was a kind of golden age. Well, it was also in Iran. I wasn't there. I didn't get to Iran until the 60s, but still that was a golden age. Nur Ali Burman was alive, and I met him, and Ahmed Abadi, I met him and then recorded him. These were the great musicians of that time. They are still great musicians, but now we have a different phenomenon everywhere in the world. In Iran now, I understand that many new students coming up in the conservatory, they learned the radif from somebody's radif perfectly, and they can't improvise.
Right.
And that used to be the first step. The improvisation, you begin by feeling the makam or the dastgāh or the gushe and improvise, create from that. So now the students can recreate it perfectly. Is that advancement? I'm not sure. In Korea, I find it very sad. When I was recording in Korea in the mid-60s, there were still 4 or 5 kayagum players who improvised, they made their own creations on the spot. Now nobody does. They play 2 versions. 3 versions, as 3 perhaps. But everybody plays those 6 fixed versions and plays them over and over again. And they've convinced themselves that that's an advancement. I don't think it is. I think we've lost something, the ability. I think Mozart improvised a lot. What we have is what he wrote down. I would love to see how
That's
what
how
he
they
spin
would
on.
compose, actually.
Right.
They would come
That's right,
Beethoven.
they
Yeah, they
compose
would
by-
come.
exactly,
Yeah, they would
yeah.
improvise and then
Beethoven,
compose. Yeah.
yeah, certainly
This
improvise.
is a lost art in actually Western classical
Yeah.
music as well. After the development of
Somehow
the
or
notation.
other, we got this, all over the world developed this Western attitude that improvising is like something you do privately. But, you know, like even Hamza al-Din, who I knew very well, the Sudanese oud player, he said he never, I thought he was improvising. He said, no, I never improvise in public. He improvises and composes that, and he plays a fixed version. So I don't think it's wonderful what we have. It's wonderful. There's wonderful music going on all over the world. But I regret that period when people were isolated, when they dreamed in Dastgāh, Gushe, and then created
Absolutely.
from their dreams. You know?
Absolutely. You know, due to many changes that happened after the revolution in Iran, I mean, they actually banned carrying instrument on the street. They would break the instrument on the street for 1 year right after the revolution. So imagine the country that is inviting all these great artists from around the world coming to Shiraz Art Festival. The year after, they're breaking the instrument. It's surreal. But
to me, one of the things that's very funny, in '65, I was in Iran, in Tehran, and one of the things I did besides meeting Ahmed Abadi and Nurari Burman, I went to one of these theaters in the bazaar, and I saw Gugush. She was a teenager. Her first record had just come out. She was a little teenager. And now she's immensely popular. But the last I heard, they cannot play her records on the radio in Iran. They only play instrumental versions of her songs. So they know it's her. They're playing instrumental versions of her songs, but her voice is somehow, the woman singing is offensive.
Right.
It's just very sad.
it is.
It's a
but
tragic.
But there are so many layers. What's happening in Iran?
Yeah.
Actually, a lot of Iran, as you mentioned, so many Iranian young people, they are interested learning Persian instrument. There is a 24 hours satellite channel that these kids from everywhere, different villages, they send music to, it's like a music video with their own standard. But constantly you see things that happening that they send their videos that they're performing, playing Iranian music. I mean, industry of making Iranian instrument is actually very in a different place right now. So it's in a way part of it is coming because they wanted to be rebel, they wanted to be against what they are asking them to be, but also part of it they find their identity and they think in order for us to basically preserve our heritage is to play instrument. You cannot imagine in the places like the city, religious city like Qom, for example, so many music school is there, and it's just amazing what's happening. But there are downsides, as you mentioned. Right. You know, this is something.
No, but that's good. The schools are good. It's passing on
but
the tradition.
With these all social media and everything, everyone wants to be seen.
Yeah.
All these young people, they wanted to perform being seen. As I said, with this 24 hours satellite channel, that is something I'm worried, and it's not just about Iran; it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah,
it's everywhere. And it's very wonderful and dangerous at the same time.
And it brings us to what is our responsibility in institution like UCLA? How we can help to preserve the music, the culture.
Yeah.
How is it possible? What can we do?
So I say we keep studying all the things. Unfortunately, ethnomusicologists don't study music anymore. I don't know what they're studying there. I look at the new Journal of Ethnomusicology and I can't understand it. I look and see, maybe somebody is going to tell me something. I want to know something about the music of this culture. That's what I want. Maybe they'll tell me something, but often not. But there's still a lot there to be studied. I mean, this is, as my dear friend Necdet Yaşar, the Turkish musician, would say, Makam is a very deep subject. There's much more to study. This is just the beginning. Yeah. This is just what Farhat did was just the beginning. There's much more. Let's hope we do it, because later generations, if the richness of the living tradition and the improvisation is gone, you can't recreate it unless you have something, you preserved it somehow. So someone has to study it to show the path so that we can get by, maybe create something new, not go back and play the old thing, but to create the new on the basis of a broader knowledge rather than a limited knowledge.
Exactly, exactly. Can you tell us a little about his last visit in Los Angeles when he came in 2019?
Yeah, there was a great reunion. We hadn't seen each other. We would run into each other every few years, but when he was in Iran, of course, he was isolated all those years that he was there. Then he told me, I ran into him somewhere, and he told me, he said he just went on a vacation, took a trip to a conference, I think he said, and he never came back. He said it was impossible to, and he was in good position there and a good position in Iran, but even that he found very, very difficult. So we met over the years now and then, not often enough, I said. So when he came back, when was it, 2019, I think, something like
19.
that. 19, yeah. We met again. It was wonderful to see each other. That he was talking and was being interviewed here by people in the archive. It was great to see him again, but I found him the same refined, very refined gentleman from sort of European, Middle Eastern, very refined gentleman.
We have a video
there.
from that visit. Let's see if we can play a little bit of it.
As I remember this one, I'm sitting across, but I'm interrupting a lot. I couldn't keep out of the conversation. Every time he would say something, I had to jump in and add to it.
So just
Music, privacy.
it's coming from here. Okay.
Violin was my instrument.
Okay.
I had studied with my violin teacher, who was a very good violinist. I had studied at the École Normale in Paris, and he also taught me solfeggio and theory of music. I had no really schooling as such in music before.
I gotta admit, he was so handsome.
I even attempted to enter the conservatory. There was a conservatory of music in Tehran at that time. But I was too old already, because they took in students from sort of secondary school, from high school age. And I was in my mid-teens by that time. And so I just studied with my violin teacher. But then gradually the fascination and love of classical music was sort of overwhelmed me, and I became resolved that this is what I want to do, study classical music, and became very drawn to the idea of becoming a composer. Now, when should I go through all these things, or is it?
Please, yeah.
But when I approached the idea with my parents, it was not something that they could really comprehend. Because, well, in those days, for a Persian family, the son wanting to go abroad to study composition, that sounded pretty ridiculous. I mean, you aim to become a doctor, medical doctor, or a lawyer, a civil servant. These were the sort of things that was a career made of. Composition didn't make much sense. So they were quite opposed to the idea. But I was absolutely resolved that this is what I want to do. And in the end, to cut a long story short, I came to an agreement with them that if they would send me with one-way ticket and enough funds to sustain me for 1 year, beyond that I will take care of myself. And that was only possible Because initially I was thinking of going to France. I even applied, sent my application and so on, was accepted at the École Normale, where my violin teacher had studied for many years. But then when it came to the idea of having to sustain myself while studying, but we are talking about just a few years after the end of the war. I mean, Europe was in shambles, it was broken.
Sorry. Again, you can have access to this on UCLA archive. I wanted to ask you also, what do you think in terms of all this? I mean, you mentioned a little, but we are leaving Los Angeles. I think it's a very unique city in many ways. I think we are truly practicing diversity. Not truly, but I would say the fact that so many people from different culture are living here and they are participating in institutions like UCLA or museum, it's something, it tells us that it's something happening. I would not see that in many European countries, I would say. And this, the reason for, and we all know why this is happening. Is part of it is because of the, profit and things that is important for us. Yeah, opportunity.
It's interesting, but you say that. I got to tell you that when I met Hormoz, he was the first Persian I had ever met. And there were no Persians. There were no Iranians here. There were none. I mean, there must have been. There must have been. But there were no Persian restaurants.
Now it's hard to find American.
There were no Koreans here. Very, very few Koreans. One or two Koreans. And now, look what we have. They all came here.
Yes.
Korean restaurants. I can get cello kebab anywhere up and down the coast. I thought it was this wonderful place I went to. I was with Tsuge, the Japanese musicologist, who he and I were graduate students together in Japan. Then he started to do his fieldwork in Iran. So when I got to Iran in '65, he was there. Tsuge was there. So he was like my guide and translator. It was funny. We were speaking in Japanese, and he was translating into Farsi for me. So Japanese was our common language. So then there was this wonderful place where you could get cello kebab. That was north of Tehran, close to the mountains. It was under a tent. A wonderful place. And twice I went in '78, my wife and I went, and I said, I know this place in Tehran. It's wonderful. They wouldn't let us off the plane. It was in the middle of the revolution. Wow. And so we came back from India again. We stopped in Tehran. We couldn't get off the plane. I said, well, too bad. I was going to take you. Now we can get cello kebab everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
Everywhere.
Exactly. But now we have this population here. Yeah. Every now and then we have events at UCLA. I mean, the concert like this one, but concert, it's always full house, people coming to see our concert. What is your suggestion for us to, first of all, we are in academia, but we wanted to get connected as much as we could. We get connected to people outside of academia, but also have some kind of achievement at the school that is going to be useful for the future of the art itself.
It's easier now. It was very difficult then to go out. I remember my colleague Robert Brown, who was also a graduate student here, he and I used to go downtown LA looking for a Yugoslavian nightclub or a restaurant or so where they had music, or the mariachi we'd go to, or we were always looking for something downtown. It was hard. The communities were isolated from each other. But now they're much more accessible, but somebody has to do it. A few years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago, Morteza Varzi was here. And he's a great musician. He just happened to be here. I met him somehow through the California Arts Council, and he came to my house with, I don't remember the tar player's name. They played together. It was wonderful. But then now he's gone, he's passed away. So waves and waves of people come, but somebody has to actively go out and connect from the university, I mean, saying, to use these people to connect with them, to even to enjoy it, even if not to say to study it and record it, but to enjoy it. This thing is going on around us, but you can't be passive about it. Even though, like, community, there's a whole huge Korean community here, there's a lot going on. We could pursue it, but somebody has to do it.
Right. And going back to Dr. Farhat and those days, what was the challenges for you guys being here at UCLA? Did you have something that...
Well, for example, for Farhat, he was Persian music. He was Iranian music. Because he was the only one. He was the only one who knew anything about it, who had an inkling, who could share with us. From him, I learned the difference, for example, the clear differences between Arabic, Turkish, and Persian music. But he was the one who had that source. He was the only one. There was nowhere to go. There was nowhere else. We had to go to Iran to discover it further. Now it's all around us now.
But any request or any desire he had to make things easier for him at UCLA, you were his friend, so you could talk to each other about the issues you guys had those days. I'm asking because, we all have sometimes the issues.
We were all misfits. We were all misfits. You got to face that, first of all. Ethnomusicology, what's that? What the hell is that? At least now, when I was on the National Council I was appointed by the President of the United States to serve on the National Council, and the famous painter, Helen Frankenthaler, her paintings sell for millions, and she was a friend because we're all on the council, we're all equals. And when I first got onto the council, she said, an ethnomusicologist. I've always wanted to say I knew one. I said, oh, great, we have arrived. Now, at last, somebody knows what we are. But for a long time, said, you're studying what? What? Ethno what? Yeah. So we were all misfits. And I think we still are. I think there's more of us now, but so when I can remember when we would go to a Society for Ethnomusicology meeting, and all the members who were attending the meeting could stand in one photograph and be photographed together. Can't do that anymore.
Right.
Thousands and thousands of rooms and rooms and rooms.
If you don't mind, I wanted to play a little bit an excerpt from the movie that he.
Oh, this is the cow.
Cow, yes. Let's hear a little bit of the music.
Who's the director?
Dariush Mehjui. Dariush Mehjui. This is before the revolution, yes. Actually, the director played the santur himself. It's interesting.
Beautiful. It's very
beautiful. Yeah.
That string quartet is heavenly. That is just gorgeous. I don't think I've heard that before. That's a Persian recording?
Yes.
Yeah. So not available anywhere.
It's actually on YouTube. You can.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, you can find it. It's on YouTube. Anyways, If you don't mind, I can ask Professor Farhad's wife, Dr. Bagramian, to join us from London. I think I have to find a way to do this. I'm not.
Technology.
I know.
Is our friend.
Yes. Let me see how I can do that. I think
I am online, but
yes.
I don't know whether you can see me or not.
Let me see if I can.
Welcome.
There you go. Great.
Oh, good.
Great.
Right, thank you very much for having me here. I would like to begin by thanking UCLA and in particular Dr. Shahab Paranj for putting together this wonderful commemoration of my husband Hormoz Farhat's life and work. Hormoz's long years in UCLA, both as a student and later on as a tenured member of staff at the Department of Music, were formative of his academic life and career throughout his long life. UCLA was for him and remained the best model of what a university should be, and he continued comparing all other academic institutions to this ideal model, maybe not always to the delight of his subsequent employers. But he was forthright about this. His last trip before his final illness was to his beloved California, and he was surprised and genuinely touched by the reception he received at his alma mater in a celebration of the first ever PhD program in ethnomusicology set up by the inimitable Mantle Hood, whom I came to know later on during his visits to Dublin. And he was really a genuine character in so many ways. I was also glad that he met with his friend of many years, Dr. Garfias, whom I had known by reputation. But also I would like to thank Dr. Paranj, who I think was also instrumental on that occasion, and maybe they met personally on that occasion. Really, that event, I don't think he anticipated it, but it gave real meaning to the last years of his life, because he became very ill quite a short while after his visit in 2019. I'm very pleased also to announce that today's event gives meaning, a very special meaning, to a project that our son, Robert Farhat, and I have been pursuing for more than a year. So we would like to take this occasion to unveil in UCLA a website dedicated to the work and life of Hormoz Farhat. The launch of the website on December 12th, today, coincides with our son Robert's birthday, who was and continued to be a source of great pride and joy in Hormoz's life to his last days. So it seems that the stars have all aligned to make this a particularly auspicious date. But let's hope that the stars are also aligned and will allow me to share the webpage with you.
Please.
But if I can perform that technological magic, let me give you the domain name, which is hormozfarhat.com. Quite easy, and you can all go and search that domain name. And then, let me take a minute to try and share the webpage with you.
That's wonderful. This is when I heard about this, I said, what a great coincidence, and this is a great gift for all of us. This is the website. Wonderful. Beautiful.
Okay, good. It worked. So even technology is collaborating today. As I said, all the stars have been aligned perfectly. The webpage falls into different sections. For instance, A Life in Music, which contains photos, interviews with Hormoz at various places, some of his many lectures, articles about him, commemorations of him, for instance, a personal remembrance of him by Harry White, one of his PhD students, who became a very prominent, in fact, one of the most prominent ethnomusicologist in Ireland. So you will receive many sources of information there. It also has a section of biography, and some of the recordings of his music, both online and taken from performances, live performances on YouTube. So, for instance, you can hear his quartets, you can get access to some of his piano music, etc. But I would like to emphasize two aspects of this webpage in particular, two aspects that make Robert and I very proud. Firstly, we would like to share the scores of Hormoz's music, or much of it anyway, accessible through the webpage and downloadable free of any copyright restrictions. We knew, Robert and I, that Hormoz would like to see his scores deposited in Iran at some stage. But also we were well aware that he wanted his music to be available to all who would like to perform or study it without any copyright or financial restrictions. He wrote music not for the sake of fame. He actually did not try to get his music performed at all. He was very reluctant to try anything that would look like aggrandizing himself. But he also wanted this to be a resource for anyone who might enjoy his work. He loved music for its own sake, and he wanted others to see it that way. So we are very happy to share these scores, and there are more scores actually. We have discovered quite a few in his papers, and we would like to prepare those as well. But I would like to thank in particular a friend and former employee of the Contemporary Irish Music Center, Linda O'Shea Farhan, who managed with great persistence to convince a reluctant Hormoz Farhat to make his scores available to all. And then also particular thanks goes to Irish Contemporary Music Center for their generosity to allow us to share these scores with everyone. So you will be able to download everything that is available there.
That's pretty amazing.
The second, I'm not sure if this is going to work because I'm getting an error message. But the second aspect of the webpage that should be of interest to everyone, or I hope it is, are copies of Hormoz's books and articles. We have deposited there copies of some of his scholarly work, mainly on ethnomusicology, and they are downloadable, but also copies of his books. In particular, I would like to mention his last book, the semi-biographical notes from a composer's life, present, past. This is available, the PDF of it to download from the webpage.
Wow.
No, it's not working, I'm afraid, but that's okay. You can see it when you go to the webpage. But in particular, I would like to mention the Persian translation of that book, which came out only a few months ago. It has been translated by a cousin of Hormoz and Robert, Tahmine Farhat, who lives in Paris and was very anxious to undertake this translation and has done a wonderful job. And then it has been published by Asu Press, a remarkable cultural institution and publication firm. And they also have generously made that book available for free download. So please go ahead and have a look at these pieces.
That's great.
The book is in large part a selection of articles, memories from Hormoz's childhood, upbringing, later life, but certainly some very important sections are dedicated to his life in America and in UCLA. And since his arrival in the US and his the way he had to maintain life and soul together in order to study music was mentioned, I would like to refer you to the hilarious accounts he gives of the very odd jobs that he had held throughout his career of studying in UCLA. I don't know how he managed look as dashing as he appeared to have to Robert, but Garfias. But he really was doing all sorts of very bizarre jobs in order to be able to afford to study at UCLA.
That's amazing.
But the book also has two substantial academic chapters, but written in a very accessible format. One is dedicated to music and his final thinking about that topic, Persian and Western music. And the second is dedicated to music education, where again, UCLA plays a major role. And as I mentioned, that remained his ideal form of music education, although he was trying to be discreet about this and not to offend too many, at least in his book. But he did continue to really admire the way music was taught and developed in UCLA. I hope that tradition continues despite the many ill winds whirling around universities in America, as I'm sorry to add. I would like to finish this section by thanking my former PhD student and now Dr. Liam O'Bagan, who undertook constructing this webpage, and also to Robert, who spent many, many hours, despite his very busy career, in perfecting it and making it seem look as good as it does now. Robert tells me that there's much more work to be done. I think it looks perfect, but then we have different standards about what web pages should look like, maybe. But I would appreciate very much if UCLA can send us any material or indeed those present today, if you would like to send us any material that you would like us to add to the web page. And very finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to announce that Robert and I have decided to deposit the handwritten scores of my husband's music with UCLA's music library.
That's great. What a
As I mentioned, Hormoz would have dearly loved for the manuscripts to find their way to Iran. He spent very little time in Iran, actually, if you take into account his long life. But his affinity and knowledge of the culture and language of that country and its geography and its history was amazing. He continued to speak perfect Persian, write perfect Persian. He corrected the translation of the book Dastgāh into Persian. So it was really quite astonishing how, despite so little time spent in that country, he remained so Persian, but also European and American. But the manuscripts, written in his absolutely beautiful handwriting, clear as any typewritten or any manuscript produced by Sibelius, should remain somewhere safe. And UCLA would be the perfect choice for
Thank
that.
you. This is a
and
great,
he would
great
have
news.
been really, really happy to know that they are finding safe harbor in such a fabulous and respected institution, open to all musicians to study and to reproduce if they wish. And work on it.
Let me just add, if I could, at this moment, just this evening, just today, just before we talked, I was able to introduce Hormoz's nephew to the archivist, and they are talking about depositing the score. So the conversation has begun. It's on its way. You can rest assured.
Yes. Thank you very much. So this is wonderful. Hormoz's nephew, Professor Nader Kamangar, is a professor at UCLA. So the tradition of UCLA connections with the Farhat family continue. He was truly loved by his uncle, and I'm delighted that this is being made possible through his intervention and also through our knowledge that this is what Hormoz would have really liked in the absence of the possibility of placing the manuscripts in Iran.
That's wonderful.
So I think I should end at that note and thank again everybody present there, particularly the organizers, and wish you all a very good Christmas celebrations for the festivities that's coming along. Hormoz was truly a cosmopolitan. We celebrated all kinds of events, including Christmas, and then Nowruz, and so on.
Right.
So I wish you a Happy New Year as well.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to add, sadly, the last time I met Hormoz in 2019, he told me that he and his wife Maria were going to be coming to California, and I think she was invited to Irvine. So I was looking forward to having them at my house, and then he got quickly ill shortly after that. Right. So it was very sad.
That's exactly right. That was a year when I had a sabbatical, when we had planned to come to California together, but also to go to Armenia, where I currently hold a chair as well. And that would have been his first visit to Armenia. And his beloved violin teacher, who was mentioned in this conversation, was Armenian. So he had a particular affinity, not just an Armenian wife, but also an Armenian music teacher, which was much more important to him, I think. So unfortunately, none of those plans worked. But it was really a touching moment for him when he received the reception that he did from UCLA. He never expected any accolades from anyone. That's genuinely true of him and his personality. So he was always surprised and very pleased when he received them, even though he might not have shown them as effusively as I might do.
That's great to hear that. Thanks again. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Bagramian.
Thank you.
From London, thanks for giving us a great news, launching this website. This is a fantastic website. Thanks to your son for making it. And also, again, we are so honored to keeping these scores at UCLA. It's Dr. Farhat's home, and I'm sure it's going to be useful for our students at UCLA. And again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to add one last thing. I mean, we're talking about all of a person's life here today, and we're looking at it all, from his various attempts to study here and there and learn things, and his research, and then finally his compositions. And we're seeing a whole life. And it's a very fulfilling life. He had a very fulfilling and happy, I hope a happy life, I think so. I think he had a lot to be satisfied about. And so I think that's very reassuring to me to look at it all at once. One thing I wanted to do, I wanted to bring Hormoz back to life for just a moment. I suddenly remembered something he told me. One of his earliest memories of his childhood, it has nothing to do with anything. It's just a very real memory. He told me when he was a very, very little boy, he had to follow his mother everywhere. He went everywhere with his mother. And the thing that he hated most of all was having to go to the bath, because he went to the women's section, and he was this little boy, and all the women were shouting and splashing and noisy, and he said he absolutely hated it. That was one of his memories of childhood.
I can see that with his personality, he wouldn't like it. Yeah, no, it was great. I had the honor of having him at my place in 2019. My mom was there for a month, and she made Persian food, fesenjan, and we had a great time there. But one thing that I remember, that when he started to talking, we were just mesmerized, listening to him hour and hour, he would tell us from everything, from everywhere, with so much detail, and it was just amazing. And I think when he came here, he was 90 years old. I don't know if I'm right or not, but yeah, he was 90, so it was just amazing. And what a great loss for us that he's not here, but I'm glad we were able to hold this event and talk about his legacy, and I hope we continue to talk about and play his music and read his books. Thanks again, Dr. Garfias, to being with us. Just thank you. It was honor to sit next to you and talk about one of your old colleagues and talk about good old days. I wanted to thank again Gramian-Emrani family for establishing Iranian music at UCLA. Also, Farhang Foundation for their continuous support of Iranian music. Again, thanks to my colleagues at ethnomusicology department who helped us to put together all these files, and they all came here. Thank you again, and I hope to see you again in our future events. Thank you.
Thank you.